Welcome to a sad and solemn episode of the Metal Voice, where the passing of Clive Burr at the unfortunately young age of 56 due to complication of multiple sclerosis on March 12th, 2013. A sad day. We lost a heavy metal god.
Yes.
And ex-drummer of Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
And
we're here to remember,
pay
homage to Clive Burr, his years in Maiden and afterwards and before.
Of course, Doug Sampson was on the Soundhouse tapes, was the drummer that started with Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Found it tough doing pub tours and throughout England, and Steve's like, "What are we gonna do when we're out?
What are we gonna do, mates?
What are we gonna do? We're out there for 2 hours with our headlining. You can't, physically you're not strong enough. You're just falling apart." They had to get rid of Doug Sampson, unfortunately. Yeah. Dennis Stratton had just joined Iron Maiden, and he knew Clive Burr was looking for a gig.
He was on the scene.
He was on the scene looking for a gig. Dennis Stratton didn't want to say too much. He had just joined the band, so he waited a couple weeks, and he kind of slipped in like Clive's looking for something, and everybody knew Clive in West End, East End of London. And they part of the scene, and so they went down to some geriatric, some pub where some geriatric band was playing. I think he was just playing brushes, like he says, for a $5 and maybe a pint of beer, and they all went down and had a good laugh. And when Clive showed up for his audition, he had a West Ham scarf on to put him right in with Ari.
You're in, baby, you're in.
And then I don't even think he auditioned. Who knows? I mean, they looked great, and he always had a big cheery smile. And next thing you know, he's part of history with, some might argue, the 3 greatest Iron Maiden albums, the first 3 albums.
Iron Maiden 1, here's an album that the songs have been worked over in the clubs, right? I mean, is not much of his, let's say, his drumming, but nevertheless, Running Free, look at that beat. And that was probably one of the newer songs that wasn't around in the club days. You can't forget that beat. It's probably the biggest hit on that album, Running Free. And they still play that in concert today. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
very tribal. Look, I spit on myself, Alan.
It's much faster live than on the original recording. But for me, he really came into his own on Killers. That was his sound that was being on there. A great production from Martin Birch. Just listen to the Ides of March, the very first song.
But that's disputed. That's disputed, the Ides of March. Thunderstick says it was him, but I say it was Clive Burr.
Barry Purkis. Thunderstick.
Thunderstick.
Who was in the band for what?
A second.
For a second.
But anyways, Purgatory, Drifter, this whole album, you could really see Clive Burr contributing, and especially in Murders in the Rue Morgue. And
then the ever famous start to Run to the Hills. That North America, that was the start. That was, for me, that was it. That was Iron Maiden, Run to the Hills, that launched him. They were headlining by this point. And,
but Alan, that drum pattern for Run to the Hills, that beat, you remember it.
What the heck's he doing?
If you're listening to the radio and you just hear that beat, you go, that's Run to the Hills.
That's Maiden.
Clive Burr contributed to the huge success that Run to the Hills was. Number the Beast, phenomenal playing at 22 Acacia Avenue, just amazing.
Gangland, and plus he wrote too. He contributed to Gangland, Total Eclipse. These are songs that he co-wrote with Steve Harris, Dave Murray. Again, a great, phenomenal drummer. Unfortunately, being 20 years old with the world at your feet in North America, temptations rise, and
too bad.
He was far from being the worst culprit in the band. But the fact that he was a drummer, he was messing up Ari's gig. Being the bass player, of course, he was the first one to be affected. They warned him time and time again, throwing up
your act, mate.
Throwing up in a bucket during the show is probably not something you want to do when you're going to be eventually headlining for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, rumors were hiding that Nico was in the scene, and Clive called him up, and Nico was like, "Hey, man, it's your gig.
Yeah.
You clean up, it's yours, and good luck to you." But that unfortunately wasn't the case. And at which point, like some before him, Clive Burr was asked to leave the band.
Yeah.
And then you said he went on to actually replace Nico in Trust.
He replaced Nico in Trust, and Nico came to Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
I wonder what would have happened if Clive Burr stuck it out and played on Peace of Mind. I think he would have done a great job. It would have been a different sound, but nevertheless, he's a great drummer. And he's always contributed to that Iron Maiden, those early years sound.
And even other recordings you want to check out would be, of course, Made in Japan.
Yeah.
And the CDs on Eddie's Archives, where you got the BBC archives as well as live performances of him at the live Beast over Hammersmith, which was a live recording from the Beast on the Road tour. And you've got performances at Reading, the very first performance, a special guest to UFO at Reading in 1980, and also Castle Donington in 1982 for the number of the Beast tour. So there's other great recordings.
And he also joined Dennis Stratton in Praying Mantis.
Oh, I didn't know
here and there. I mean,
I didn't know Dennis Stratton was in Praying Mantis.
Yes, he was.
So I learned something new.
Here and there. Then after that, he played with Dee Schneider, Twisted Sister. You can read in his book.
And there's Gog Magog, which had Paul Di'Anno on vocals, Janet Gears on guitar, Pete Willis from Def Leppard.
You want to see my impression of Pete Willis? No, I won't.
No. And Clive Burr was supposed to be the drummer. I don't know who the bass player was supposed to be, but apparently this was some super group that was just, on paper.
Yes, it's too bad. It would have been a great band.
And then, like you said, he actually contributed to the writing with Widowmaker and Dee Schneider's group, Desperado. And some of those tracks can be found on the Widowmaker recordings. But that would have been interesting. Bernie Terme on guitar.
Oh, yeah, great.
And Clive Burr on drums. And then, of course, when they're doing the history of Iron Maiden, they're doing the DVDs, the making of classic albums with a number of the Beasts. People were wondering, well, how come Clive wasn't interviewed? Or Clive didn't want to be interviewed. And he was a little... Because he was suffering from multiple sclerosis, he didn't feel physically he was up to being on camera, and there was a lot of people, he saw the hesitant responses. They thought maybe he was on drunk or on drugs, and he was a little embarrassed by his interviews, and at which time it came to light that he did have multiple sclerosis. And of course the band rallied behind him. They knew the financial responsibilities with this terrible disease that he was under, the duress he was under, and they immediately organized a bunch of concerts. They re-released Run to the Hills, and all the proceeds went to the Clive Burr Fund. And unfortunately, now we're here, 2013, and we lost a member of the Maiden family and of the metal community. So
you know what? Let's remember his music. And here's my memory from my concert in Iron Maiden. I saw him on Number of the Beast tour. I was there in a front row, and I could see Clive Burr, just 10 feet away. And it was like, meeting up with a hero and seeing him there. And it was quite the experience. And I'm happy I have that memory. And I'd like to say that even though he's passed away, his music will live on and on and on. And he was part of Maiden's history. And he was a huge component to the success of Maiden.
Right. Definitely.
So, up the irons. Long live Clive Burr.
All right, may you rest in peace.